This is Dominico Gry, and in his 1916 mugshot, he is listed as 21 years old, 5'6", born in Italy, and his occupation as a laborer. Dominico was arrested for murder, and this is his story. It's June 2nd, 1916, and Dominico is working as a woodsman for the Northwestern Redwood Company and living in a logging camp near Sherwood Valley, which is located in Mendocino County in Northern California. That evening, he met up with several men to drink at a cabin owned by a German man named Martin Koenig. The local newspaper reported that the group consisted of several Italians, a few Russians, and one lone German, which was Martin. These logging camps were often filled with men from all over the world. The work was hard and living accommodations were minimal, but it was one of the few jobs open to most immigrants, and if you could stick it out long enough, you could save up enough money to buy some property and bring your family over. By 1916, the European War, as Americans called it at this time, had been underway for almost 2 years. After much drinking, apparently the topic of war was brought up. It was reported that the conversation quickly got heated and Dominico became abusive and was thrown from the cabin. This only enraged him more, and he went to another cabin to retrieve a gun and came back and started firing into the windows of Martin's cabin. In an attempt to de-escalate the situation, they let him back in and Dominico picked Martin out of the group and opened fire. Martin fell to the ground and Dominico fired 2 more shots into him. He ran off into the night and Martin died en route to the hospital, which was about 15 miles south of the camp. Dominico returned to the camp a few days later to give himself up to Deputy Sheriff Clay, who took him to the county jail in Ukiah. He entered a plea of not guilty and his trial was set for September 26th. At trial, the defense tried to argue self-defense, but the jury didn't buy it and came back with a verdict of guilty of murder in the second degree. He was sentenced to 15 years in San Quentin State Prison. This is D.L. Flint, and in his 1924 mugshot, he is 53 years old, 5'6", his nativity is listed as American, and his occupation as a school teacher. He was arrested for obtaining money under false pretenses, and this is the story of his arrest. Flint was born in 1861 in Dexter, Maine. According to the local paper, Flint was a highly educated man who graduated from Colby College in Maine in 1897, held a degree from Columbia, and studied at Stanford. He taught school in the East before coming to California. In November 1923, Flint arrived in a town called Willits, which is located in Mendocino County in Northern California. He first found work at the Willits News before settling into the offices of the State Highway Commission. According to the local paper, he was a plausible chap with a very pleasing address and easily made friends with many people soon after his arrival. He told many of his new friends that he had recently lost his wife and son who had died in San Francisco and he was just looking for a new start. Shortly after establishing himself, he made it known to some of his associates that he planned to purchase a plot of land near town. He went to the First National Bank in Willits and attempted to negotiate a $7,000 loan after making a deposit in the bank to establish his credit. He told the bank that he had a large sum of money, rumored to be $300,000, in a Boston bank and produced evidence to support his claim. The bank agreed to grant him the $7,000 loan, $2,000 now and $5,000 later, with the understanding that Flint would transfer his account from the Boston bank to theirs. Flint took the $2,000 and purchased several automobiles, 2 that he gave away, some guns, he made a payment on a ranch, and bought a few more things for himself. Before the bank granted an additional $5,000, they became suspicious and tried to look a little bit deeper into Mr. Flint. During their investigation, they came in contact with a bank in New Haven, Connecticut, and found that Flint was wanted there for embezzlement and fraud using the same exact tactics. The Willits Bank called the sheriff, and the sheriff tracked down Flint to make the arrest. Upon his arrest, Flint confessed that he had no money in the Boston bank and ultimately confessed to a number of other crimes. Go to part 2. Upon his arrest, they found that he had cut all the labels out of his clothes and destroyed all of his personal papers so that he couldn't be tracked. When he was taken before Judge H.L. Preston and pled guilty, he readily detailed his long career of swindling, and he said it started 15 years earlier in New England when he stole $1,000 from 2 minor children under his care. Next, he defrauded 3 New Haven, Connecticut banks out of around $15,000. It turns out that the New Haven banks lost track of Flint because shortly after he fled town, they received a telegram from New York City stating that Flint had died in a hospital there, and they could find no trace of him after. Next, he defrauded a bank in Ontario, California out of about $1,000 and a new automobile. At first, they believed he had unalived himself by drowning himself in the ocean. Later, they had heard he fled to Canada. His final crime that he revealed was that he stole $51 from his former students and hundreds from a milk fund at a school where he was the principal. Friends he made along the way said he would pretend to be in a deep sorrow over the death of close relatives, and when he would flee town, his new friends would often believe that he had unalived himself. Flint claimed that he would commit these dishonest deeds during mental lapses, and when he would recover his better self, he felt deep regret and willingly made restitution. When asked what he would do with the money, he stated that he liked to live the high life and help the poor. The local newspapers also made a point to detail that he had a large number of lady friends that revealed themselves upon his arrest. Judge Preston dwelt at length on the matter and sentenced him to 1 to 10 years at Folsom Penitentiary. Prisoners from Mendocino County were typically sent to San Quentin State Prison, and only the hardened career criminals were sent to Folsom. The state parole board determined that he would serve 5 years. This is Michael Dennis Nolan, or as he was better known, Big Mike. In his 1913 mugshot, he is listed as 39 years old, 6'1", and 205 pounds. Mike was arrested for blind pigging, and at the time of his arrest, the local papers were calling him King of the Blind Piggers in Mendocino County. Some of you might be asking, what is blind pigging? It was another name for bootlegging or rum running, illegally selling and transporting alcohol. Mike definitely earned his title because between 1910 and 1916, Mike was charged with somewhere between 20 and 25 liquor-related offenses. Mike was born in Ireland and came to the United States in 1892. He settled in Mendocino on the Northern California coast, joining his sister Mary, whose husband Frank Lazarus owned the hotel in Mendocino called the Mansion House. He worked there as a stable boy and stage driver until Frank sold the hotel in 1896. Around 1904, Mike started a haul for hire business. He'd haul anything including lumber, people, dead or alive, because he also had a hearse, or booze. The latter is what gained him his notorious reputation. By the early months of 1910, Mendocino passed a number of ordinances outlawing the sale of intoxicating liquors within the county without a wholesale liquor license. They also gave districts within the county a local option to go completely dry and ban these establishments. Many within the county voted to do so, including Mendocino. Around this time, Mike built a stable, and almost immediately after it was built, someone hung a sign on it that read Hay Barn Saloon. The Mendocino Beacon joked that he must not believe in advertising because he cut it down with a hatchet, Carrie Nation style. A couple months later, someone painted a large sign on the side of his stable that read The Traveling Saloon. M.D. Nolan, proprietor. It was honestly hard to track how many times he was charged or arrested because he would often be awaiting multiple trials when he racked up more charges. It practically became a running joke in the county because he was rarely convicted. The particular situation that led him to being arrested and booked in this mugshot started on July 2nd, 1913. The authorities caught word that Mike was going to take a load of booze to dry Compshe for the 4th of July, so they went by Mike's place and caught him preparing his load. They confiscated 6.5 gallons of whiskey, 8 gallons of wine, and 360 quart bottles of beer. Mike told the constable straight to his face that he was just going to go to Fort Bragg and pick up another load because he was determined that Compshe was not going to be dry for the 4th of July. The constable was pretty much like, do it, I'm going to take it again. So Mike did, and the constable waited at the south end of the Russian Gulch Bridge and confiscated that load as well when Mike came through. The next day, they got word that he was picking up a load in Albion and headed to Compshe, so they went to the local garage and borrowed an automobile and driver in an attempt to intercept him. They did catch him right before Compshe, but he didn't have any booze. Mike eventually had to come to the county seat in Ukiah to answer for these charges, and this time he signed an affidavit promising the district attorney that he was never ever going to do it again, and that he wouldn't have any part in the illegal alcohol trade ever. He promised. All the local papers published the full affidavit and joked about how long it would last. It lasted about a week, and Mike was brought in and they threw the book at him and sentenced him to 6 months in county jail. This is how we have his mugshot. Once he got out of jail, he started right back up again and eventually caught himself another 7-month sentence. After that, in the late 1910s, Mike moved to Sausalito where he opened a grocery store and ran a milk route, but he was likely delivering other liquids on that route. In 1936, he retired and moved to Oakland, and unfortunately, 1 month later, he was struck and killed by an electric train. This is Jack Carlile, and in his 1921 mugshot, he is listed as 33 years old, 5'11", and his occupation as a laborer. Jack was arrested for murder, and this is his story. It's November 1921, and Jack, Ed Bishop, and a man named Kelly were all working in the Union Lumber Company camp in the Albion Woods, which is located in Mendocino County in Northern California. The group allegedly stole $45,000 worth of opium. Jack and Kelly found a good spot in the 10-mile woods and buried it. On November 7th or 8th, Jack and Ed left the camp in Ed's Ford Roadster so that Jack could show him where they buried their loot. When they got there, the opium was nowhere to be found. Allegedly, Kelly stole the opium, but Ed accused Jack of stealing it. They argued and Ed shot at Jack. the bullet passing through his hat. Jack shot back and killed Ed. He then buried him in the empty hole where the opium was hidden. Jack returned to the camp in Ed's roadster and removed all of Ed's belongings from his cabin, telling the camp foreman that Ed had left for San Francisco and asked him to get his belongings and ship them to him. The foreman became suspicious and notified the sheriff. The sheriff was sick, so they let it slide a couple days, thinking Ed might be off drunk somewhere, and the deputy went to work on the case on the 16th and quickly began to uncover holes in the story. On November 28th, the deputy was ready to arrest Jack when he got a message from Wendling that Jack was there a couple days previous on a jackass peddling mission, and he flashed a gun that someone recognized as belonging to Ed. The informant made sure to relay what pocket he was keeping the gun in. The deputy found Jack on Franklin Street in Fort Bragg right as he was turning on the switch to the roadster. He took the gun from Jack's pocket before he even knew it was happening. On Jack, the deputy found a couple pair of dice, Ed's bank book and keys, and a forged bill of sale for the automobile from Ed to Jack. He was arrested and taken to the county jail in Ukiah and charged with murder. During the trial, it came out that his real name was John Johnson, and the sheriff suspected that there was never any opium involved and probably never even a third party. It was likely just a jug of jackass in the hole. Regardless, he stuck to his story the entire time. John was sentenced to life in San Quentin State Prison, and after setting 3 separate fires in the jute mill at that prison, he was transferred to Folsom State Prison. John died there in 1924 as a result of severe burns that he sustained in another fire that he started in the oil storage house of that prison.